We're in San Diego, California. There's a big show going on here at three of the finest museums in the state. The show is Behold America. It's showing us visually the evolution of art from colonial times in 1776, 250 years until the present. And have we ever changed in our art? Let's go see. We are in front of the San Diego Museum of Art, where the fabulous show Behold America is being presented. The curator that put everything together, that coordinated all the three wonderful museums here in San Diego, is Amy Galpin. We're going to meet her. She is very knowledgeable and weaves quite a story.
This painting by Robert Henry was painted in 1914. It is a portrait of his wife, his second wife, Marjorie Organ Henry. Henry, the painter, often called his wife simply O. He made several works of his wife, one of which is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Another that's quite similar to our painting is in the collection of the Detroit Institute of the Arts. Robert Henry is certainly one of the most important American artists working in the 20th century. He inspired generations of painters, and he said quite famously, "Art is the province of every human being." We feel this painting is particularly special because it was painted here in San Diego. Robert Henry is very much associated with Philadelphia and New York, but this particular work was created here in San Diego in the summer of 1914. During the summer of 1914, Henry lived in La Jolla at the Richmond Cottages. He spent time with Alice Klauber, who was a local artist but was also really important to the founding of the Fine Arts Gallery of San Diego, which is now, of course, the San Diego Museum of Art. She was particularly passionate about the museum collecting both American and Asian art. The exhibition that Henry organized here in San Diego was a watershed moment in terms of the study of American art here in San Diego. It was the first time that major artists like George Bellows, John Sloan, were featured here in San Diego. Now, one of the kind of more funny aspects of that exhibition is that it was not critically well accepted here in San Diego, and none of the paintings sold. But still, as historians, when we look back at the history of American art here in San Diego, we mark Henry's time here as an important moment in sort of developing an interest in modern art here in San Diego. You know, Henry really thought it was important to capture the spirit of his sitter, and he encouraged those students who spent so much time with him to seek a sense of realism in his work. This particular portrait by Henry of his wife, I think, really reflects his time here in San Diego. It's a much brighter color palette than we see in some of other Henry's works. I love the purple brooch that she wears, or the purple scarf around her hat, the red of her coat or smock, and in the background the mix of yellow and green paint. Henry is feeling really loose with his paint and making more broader brush strokes than in some of his other works. Again, this is a really special painting to us because it is by Henry, but because it has, specifically because it has a great local story.
This is my favorite piece in the show, done by video artist Viola. At first, I thought it was a vertical piece of sculpture, minimal sculpture, but then closer, you see there are two screens, one at the top, one at the bottom. They're facing each other, but they're not meeting. Go even closer, and you can see there are two images. There's one image on the top, one at the bottom. The one on the top is of Viola's mother at the end of her life. She is sleeping in a coma-like sleep. The other facing her is his newborn baby sleeping. It's fascinating to see the spectrum of life in this piece.
Talking about this piece by Viola. This work is definitely in the exhibition in part because it does exactly what you said, Kirby. It challenges this idea of what a figure is. Behold America is divided into three sections of forms, figures, and frontiers. And in forming the selections of what would be included in each section, I wanted to have everything that would represent traditional ideas of what a figure, form, and frontier is, and then also show more contemporary or different ideas of what a form, figure, or frontier is. And you're exactly right. When you see this work in the gallery, it looks like it's a minimal work of art. But in fact, as you get closer and you look at the video screens, you see these figural representations of the artist's mother and the artist's child. This baby never met its grandmother, but here the two are united in this work by Viola, and they can see one another and look at one another.
There it went! Banging our heads against the wall, rushing, rushing. Here is an artwork. Dennis Oppenheim captures it, and Amy has something to say about it also.
The piece that we see here is by Dennis Oppenheim. It is called Attempt to Raise Hell. One of the things that I have always been joking about since the start of the show is that the title of the piece, Attempt to Raise Hell, I wondered if our gallery attendants would attempt to raise hell after hearing it all day going on. But in all seriousness, this work has been extraordinarily well received. So many times when I walk through the gallery, I hear people laughing. Even if they're frightened for a moment, they're laughing. The face of the marionette figure, you can see, has been destroyed a bit over time as it hits continuously into that bell. You know, the figure itself is, you know, a surrogate self-portrait of the artist. And it certainly makes me think of the sort of classical imagery of a thinking man, you know, but here instead of in deep thought, it's that literal act of hitting one's head again, again, and again. This work by Hugo CrossFaith is a real treasure in the collection of the San Diego Museum of Art. The museum is very lucky. We have 3 works by the artist. I became familiar with this artist when I moved to San Diego 3 years ago, and I curated an exhibition of his work entitled Brutal Beauty. The work that you see here, Bartolome, was featured in that exhibition. This work demonstrates the artist's response to the abuses at the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. It is large in scale, but the artist creates both monumental and smaller works. For much of his career, he has focused primarily on black and white imagery and drawing as opposed to painting. In this particular work, he presents to him a contemporary response to the story of Saint Bartholomew, a martyr whose skin was flayed. This work was a commission for a religious art show put on by Self-Help Graphics in Los Angeles. When Hugo was invited to participate, he knew everyone would want to submit images of the Virgin of Guadalupe. So he wanted to make his work different. He had in mind to create a piece that explored Bartolome and the contemporary connections. But it was through listening, through his earbuds in his studio in Brooklyn, New York, that he learned of the abuses of Abu Ghraib as he began this piece. He was troubled by what he heard and the events that had taken place at that prison. And so he thought of Bartolome as a way of talking about those abuses in a contemporary sense. And at the bottom of the piece, you see fists, hands, that are not connected to bodies. They symbolize the anonymous abuser, the abuser that we cannot see. There's lots of text in the work, and he's evoking kind of street signs in Tijuana. On the right-hand sign, you see the beginning of the word escándalo, scandal in Spanish. Hugo CrossFaith was born in Tijuana, and you might ask, what is he doing in this survey of art of the United States? But for me, the net was large when thinking of Artist America. A little bit about CrossFaith is to tell you that he was born in Tijuana. He went to college here in San Diego. He crossed the border frequently with his family. He actually visited the San Diego Museum of Art often as a child and has great memories of our European art collection, which he says is one of his influences in creating his signature and distinctive style, his figures that evoke the old masters. CrossFaith taught himself really how to draw from looking at books, illustrated books in his father's library. He's lived in New York for the last several years in a studio in Brooklyn, but has recently returned to Tijuana. In addition to CrossFaith's contribution to the visual culture of the United States, the subject matter seemed important for the exhibition. Though there are not many blatantly political works in this exhibition, it seemed important to include something. While we have beauty in this show, the beauty that we sort of naturally think of, the great landscapes of the United States, the great portraits of the United States, it's also important to think about you know, the brutal and the things that are harder to remember and recall. And CrossFaith allows us to do that in this piece, Bartolome.